What's up, MMA fans? Welcome back to MMA Ground and Pound, the YouTube channel with all the latest MMA news. Garry rips Neil Magny. During Garry and Neil Magny's pre-fight news conference, Magny told reporters he plans on issuing a father-like ass-whooping. Garry's response when asked about the comment was, "I think Neil was given a fucking mic yesterday, and he should sit up here on this stage and say nothing. He put his fucking foot in the dirt. If he speaks today, he's digging a hole. Nobody's allowed to ask Neil Magny a question today. He's to sit there and reflect on the shit he said, because what he said was fucking ridiculous. We're tackling a very, very big fucking issue here, mate. He should sit there and fucking sit down, shut up, and reflect on what he said." Neil's comments, according to Ian, hinted at him putting hands on a child, and that didn't sit well with him. Reporters attempted to ask the Haitian sensation to explain his comments, but Machado continued to interrupt him, saying, No, Neil's not answering a question. He's gonna sit there and he's gonna be fucking quiet. There's no fucking right to ever put your hand on a kid, ever. Discipline anything. He's to sit there and be quiet." Even as Garry continued to speak over him, Magny managed to say, "You want to play victim so bad, bro. You know exactly what that statement meant. You know for a fact I've never put a hand on my child." Another question directed at Magny was posed, but again he was interrupted by Garry saying, "Every time you speak, you need to hear the words that came out of your mouth at that press conference yesterday. You should be fucking ashamed of yourself saying you're gonna lay hands on a fucking child. Imagine that. What the fuck are you talking about? Sit there and shut your mouth and reflect on what you said." After Neil gets silenced again by Ian, he's understandably heated and begins shouting directly at Ian. "Do not mention my child. Do not mention my child. I will slap you on this stage right now. Do not mention my child. That's your only warning. Shut your mouth and do not mention my child. Next question, please." Tensions have risen quickly between these two. Do you think the comments made by Neil warranted this reaction? Comment below. Colby Covington accuses Jon Jones of using steroids. According to Colby Covington, Jon Jones refuses to fight on the same card as him. Jon is headlining UFC 295, where he'll defend his title against Stipe Miocic. Colby, who's set on challenging Leon Edwards, wants to book his title fight for the same card. Jones and Covington were former roommates in college, and they've since parted ways. In an interview with Michael Bisping, Covington had this to say about Jones.
Is Jon Jones going to be willing to share a card with his former college roommate who knows all his dirty secrets, all the skeletons are in his closet? I beg that he's going over to the UFC right now and he's telling him, yo, I'm not sharing a card with Colby. I will refuse to fight here. So the only way I see that fight happening is we know Jon's unpredictable. We know he might go sniff some white girls, kind of like Joe Biden. So, you know, he's not to be relied on. He might get pulled off the card and we might have to come save the day and be the main event. So a little birdie told me, Michael, that he went to the behind, backstage with the suits and the big dogs at the UFC and said, hey, he refuses to share a card with me. So, they're going to give him what he wants. They don't want to ruin their New York show and they're hoping that he still shows up. But, they need a backup plan. He's not reliable. I'm the ultimate company man. When I say and I give my word to the UFC that I'm showing up, I'm showing up. I've never, ever pulled out of one fight. I always am the ultimate, professional. And that's what I do best. So the UFC knows they can rely on me. That's why I'm in this position. And, it sucks that Jon doesn't want to share a car. It wouldn't even be talking shit, Mike. It'd just be talking truth.
Later in the interview, Covington goes for the gut when he accuses Bones of doing steroids, being bipolar, beating his wife, hitting a pregnant lady, and using illegal drugs. If there was any chance that Jones didn't care about sharing a card with Chaos, I think he may feel differently after hearing this interview. These allegations have been met with silence so far from Jones. Are you shocked by this interview? Let us know in the comments below. If you like our videos, make sure you hit the subscribe button so we can keep them coming. UFC Exposed. Since the lawsuit against the UFC shifted to a class action lawsuit, more and more details have been coming to light about the promoters. Ex-user Eric McGracken, a lawyer and MMA fan, has continued to share his opinions and updates on the trial as they become available. Eric compares the UFC to the mob, saying the UFC has a stronger monopoly stranglehold on MMA than the mob had on pro boxing when it was broken up. McGracken outlines why the contracts aren't in the fighter's favor, stating that the average contract lasts as long as the average career, which means no free agency. He shares court documents showing that the UFC contracts are on average 36.7 months, and the fighters' careers are on average 31 and 41 months. What this means is that the overlap eliminates the fighter's ability to negotiate a big deal in free agency, while at the peak of their careers. During this week's UFC 292 press conference, Sean O'Malley had some words of caution to any future fighters about to sign a contract.
I'd say make sure when you get these managers' contracts, you guys read them and look through them, have a lawyer look through them. Don't just sign just because these guys say I can get you in the UFC. They're taking 20% of your purse, they're taking your win bonus, they're taking your fight bonus, performance bonus. I would be very, very skeptical on signing their contracts. You could sign with a manager, but make sure you have stuff in there, that's fair to you, because none of these contracts are fair to the fighters, and these managers know that these fighters aren't going to read it. We're fighters for a reason. So I would sound very, very careful with these guys that are really close to the UFC.
We will continue to share updates as they become available. Stay tuned. Do you want to see the UFC pay these fighters? Comment below. Joe Rogan returns to UFC 292. Longtime UFC commentator and fan favorite Joe Rogan will be back ringside for UFC 292. Joe will be joining Jon Anik and Daniel Cormier for the night. Rogan appears only a handful of times per year because he no longer travels for international shows. According to TSN's Aaron Bronsteter, Conor McGregor will also make an appearance. He posted to his X account saying, "Just chatted with Brad Katona, who says that Conor McGregor's expected to attend UFC 292. He did caution that you never know with Conor, but last he heard he was probably going to be in Boston for the event." McGregor just made an appearance at Anthony Joshua vs. Robert Helenius, where he caused absolute chaos, after feeding Anthony Joshua his Irish stout following his knockout win. He took the mic and called out KSI, who was also ringside, saying, "I know your man KSI is in the crowd, yeah? He couldn't box eggs if he worked in an egg boxing factory. So if he wants to get in here, we'll give him a fight. Bare knuckle if you want. We'll see how things play out in Boston, and if the Notorious actually shows. Do you think he'll show up and force stout down the fight winner's throat? Comment below." And that wraps up the news. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to catch all the latest MMA news. Here are the top comments from our last video. One user thinks Garry is not carrying anything on his back, and another had no idea he was even fighting this week until he saw him run into McGregor. If you want to be featured in our next video, all you have to do is comment below.